Donald Trump is lashing out against California thanks to the California wildfires. We have a lot to talk about regarding the California wildfires, but first, we're going to talk about how the Chinese macroeconomy could end up affecting the United States via a deflationary spiral. We'll talk briefly about a bubble warning, but also some bullish talk to offset this. We'll talk about the Federal Reserve minutes as well as quantum computing's crash today. We'll talk about the battle going on between Jensen and D-Wave. We'll go deep into why Donald Trump thinks we should take over Greenland, which yesterday came with confusion, but today comes with a lot of clarity. We'll also talk crypto on today's Meet Kevin Report. News that makes you money. Well, let's get started. First on macro, there is bullish talk that by TS Lombard that we don't need rate cuts in 2025 because quite frankly, everything is going to boom. In fact, China is going to return demand to the United States that we're already seeing bullish ordering from Chinese firms and sales by Chinese firms to foreign countries. And that's going to end up resulting in even more of a boom in the United States for 2025. Now, sure, under Trump, you should expect higher volatility, but strong corporate fundamentals will be supported by potential cuts to the corporate tax rate. And we're going to be sticking with higher for longer, which could cause the nation's home builders to underperform. This is a thesis put out just today by an analytical company called TS Lombard. Now, this is offset by, at the same time, Bloomberg citing that China's economy is so pessimistic that the bond market is essentially assuming that China's economy is going to a deflationary 1990s style recession, depression, or deflationary spiral. One of the ways that you could look at this bond market in real time is simply Google the Chinese 10-year government bond yield. And if you go out to the little 5-year chart, you can see this collapse in the 10-year government bond. No matter how much you zoom out, we've never actually seen Chinese debt this low yielding. This is a potential sign that investors in China are fleeing out of risk assets and real estate and factories and consumption, assuming that we're going to have deflation, and they're trying to get any yield they can get their hands on so that way their money grows. See, the downside of deflation is usually when you have deflation, everybody hoards the money they have, you end up creating a depression. Because why would you buy that iPhone today if you could just wait a year and it's 20% cheaper? iPhone might not be the best example because they come out with a new one every single year anyway, but the thesis applies to machinery, cars, corporate expenses. Why buy today if it's going to be cheaper tomorrow? That would lead Chinese GDP to rapidly undershoot expectations that they can get 5% growth. And people believe that a deflationary spiral in China is caused by massive overbuilding of manufacturers, that there's just way too much excess supply now. Remember in COVID, we had too little supply. Now they're like too much supply. But some people say, well, it's good that it could export deflation to us. It's bad because if China contributes to the global economy less, then you could see European markets and other countries slow down. China also buys stuff from our companies. We're going to think, for example, we're going to talk quantum computers in just a moment. Think Qualcomm, somewhere around 45 to 65% of their revenues go to China. Around 20% of Tesla revenues come from China. Apple, about 18 to 20% of their revenues from China. So if China slows down, there's a fear that a lot of large corporations, including our Mag 7s, could get hit with limited sales because people are spending less money in China. But as you can see, there's a lot of this sort of wait and see for what's going to happen with China and Trump tariffs. Look, for example, at this. In December, China's growth has likely continued stabilizing with some marginal data improvement in select areas thanks to a new round of policy easing since September. This has supported a rebound of GDP growth in Q4. However, markets remain cautious on China's economic fundamentals, waiting for more updates on China's easing measures as well as Trump tariffs. In December, major activity growth data has likely improved. However, deflationary pressures could linger with a decline in CPI inflation and deep PPI, producer, think manufacturing, deflation. Remember, deflation, again, generally is associated with a slowing economy. This is why you try to calibrate inflation around 2 percentage points. And again, people buy bonds so that way they can at least capture some yield, especially since the Chinese stock market so far this year isn't off to the best start. It's basically been red every single day. You can also see that even China's 30-year bonds have fallen and tumbled, now with a lower yield than what Japan offers. You could here see it's a downward spiral that will keep getting worse if it's not corrected. There's a psychological element to Japan's lessons, where the longer this persists, the weaker business and consumer confidence gets. In other words, the longer China waits to actually properly prop up the Chinese economy with the appropriate amount of stimulus, the worse it gets, the more businesses are damaged, and the more businesses just say, I've had enough, I'm going to wait to spend money, and we're going to save. That saving mentality is quite the opposite of what you see in the United States, where our economy is still in spend, spend, spend mode, which is great, but may not last. And that's where you have some folks who say we're actually in a bubble environment. Now, this isn't everyone, but there was a bearish institutional letter out today by this author called Owenomics. I'd never actually heard of this person before, or this letter. And like I said, T.S. Lombard was really bullish on China. You also had, worth noting, Credit Agricole, pretty bullish. They don't expect a Federal Reserve cut in January. They think that jobs data, absent a big surprise to the downside, will just end up confirming the Federal Reserve is not going to cut. They're forecasting 145,000 jobs for this Friday jobs report at Credit Agricole, which is slightly less than what market participants are forecasting, closer to 160K, but still a lot better than something sub 100 that would be more recession fear inducing. Ultimately, Credit Agricole says this indicates a labor market that is clearly cooled but has not fallen off a cliff. Now, we've talked about this in prior videos that you're really not going to see the labor market roll over until you have layoffs. And as long as corporate profits keep going like T.S. Lombard says they might, yeah, we could potentially keep seeing higher yields and hopefully hiring rebounds because, frankly, nobody wants to go through a recession. Anyway, Owenomics writes that we are in the middle of a, quote, raging Bitcoin bubble. The stock market, or, quote, at least the lunatic fringe of meme stocks and crypto-related firms, is not far behind. The individual provides 7 pillars of identifying when you're in a bubble. One of them is that bubbles involve irrational optimists, basically, in his words, idiots who create market-wide bubbles or mispricings that could actually potentially last for years. He then says that there's this utopian idea that everybody should be able to get rich. And that also happened in 1929 when everybody wanted exposure to stocks. And then guess what? Everybody got poor over the next years as the Great Depression took hold. He says that nobody knows with certainty if Bitcoin's going to keep going up, and anybody saying otherwise is just part of the lunatic frenzy. A fanatic won't change his mind either. He's sort of really anti-Bitcoin maxi. This person really seems like there are bears, and then there are just people that just show up like once in a while, and they're just mega bears. But I guess we don't have to be mean to him. We'll just quickly get through what he's saying here. He argues that Bitcoiners who are really pro-Bitcoin just work to confuse people and then claim you don't understand Bitcoin. And the more they can confuse you, the better Bitcoin is. And after all, this time is different and the numbers keep going up. Okay, so obviously a bigly bear there. So you can see there are a lot of mixed opinions on what's going on in the market. Obviously, this jobs data is going to be very important on Friday. It's also worth noting that the stock market is going to be closed tomorrow, which I did discuss this morning in my course member live stream as we were reviewing some of the initial data that was coming out this morning, doing our fundamental analysis as we usually do. And I mentioned this in the Alpha report as well this morning, that the stock market is going to be closed tomorrow. And so really any of the trading that happened today, which I thought the market might end up being somewhat flat in anticipation of this, is based on what people think the jobs market is going to deliver to us on Friday. And so far, people are actually kind of bullish. I mean, yeah, last month we got 227,000. That might get revised down. This month, we're expecting exactly 165,000, a 4.2 unemployment rate, average hourly earnings at 0.3%, slightly down from the 0.4 last month. And we expect average weekly hours by all employees to be at 34.3, same as before with a stable labor force participation rate. We'll see what ends up happening Friday. But again, we won't get to trade on it on Thursday. We'll still provide a Meet Kevin report, though, as there is more news that happens than just market news. But first, before we get to the non-market news, we really got to get into talking about quantum computers, because quantum computing stocks absolutely got destroyed today. Look at this. D-Wave computing down 36% today. Quantum computing down 43%. Another one that I mentioned in another Meet Kevin report was Rhintech Robotics. They got wrecked today, down 18%, and I was bearish on them as well. But anyway, why is this company down 36%, for example? I mean, look at this. This stock went from under $1 to a peak of $11. What was the catalyst? The catalyst was Google's announcement of a quantum computing chip. And so this led to this surge that everybody wanted to get into quantum computing, because Google said the path has been paved for the useful usage of large-scale quantum computers. Okay, so that led to a ridiculous rally in quantum computing companies, which have mostly very terrible fundamentals, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But what led to the sell-off? The market all of a sudden recognizing fundamentals? No. In fact, if the market understood fundamentals, they probably wouldn't be investing in D-Wave anyway, because it's a different kind of quantum computing technology than what Google creates. We'll talk about the difference in just a moment. I'll explain it to you. So it's kind of funny, actually, that on a totally different type of quantum technology, an unrelated company would rally. But it's because it has quantum in the name, and frankly, that's good enough for most people's due diligence when it comes to momentum. But that's why we do a Meet Kevin report, to try to provide you the intelligence to separate these things. Anyway, the reason these stocks started falling is because yesterday Jensen mentioned it could take potentially as long as 15 years at the earliest, or on the early side, for very useful quantum computers, and potentially as long as 30 years, though that would be more on the late side. Now, the CEO of D-Wave went on CNBC today to complain and basically said, look, we've already got customers like MasterCard, and we're doing a great job with our quantum computers already in production today. And ultimately, he talked about the difference very briefly between gate-based quantum computing and annealed quantum computing. Now, while he tried brushing off that the quantum computing they use is just for optimization purposes, that's basically what it is. Let me give you a quick understanding and a quick primer on the two different types of quantum computing, because I think it's going to help you really understand what to expect in the long-term future, what to pay attention to, and, okay, that's weird, breaking, person arrested after attempting to enter U.S. Capitol Visitor Center with machete, knives in bag. 2025 is something else. Anyway, all right, so there are two types of quantum computing. There is something known as a gate-based quantum computer. A gate-based quantum computer is kind of like your classic computer, except really, really fast. And it's really good at puzzles with very, very low error rates. Puzzles would be kind of like what you need to solve using what we like to call the Shor's algorithm, kind of like a quantum algorithm, to break into cryptographies like 256 or some of the cryptography we use for various different security systems, cybersecurity, Bitcoin cryptography, you name it. These algorithms can be broken, potentially, by these quantum-based computers using gate-based, puzzle-based approaches. So when you think gate-based, just think puzzle. They're trying to, with a very, very low error rate, puzzle together a mathematical solution in a much faster way than traditional computers can do today. Today, for a computer to break like an SHA, 256 encryption, it could take hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years to actually break these encryptions. This is why they're so secure. This is what cryptography is, and that's actually what crypto basically was based on, was the idea of encryption, right? Anyway, so breaking this would take a very long time, but the thesis is that a quantum computer could build the puzzle out of breaking these security algorithms rapidly, potentially as quickly as 20 seconds. But I want you to understand the difference between the chip that Google came out with and the chip that would be required to operate for 20 seconds to actually be able to break, let's say, Bitcoin's algorithm. All right. The chip that Google came out with, the Willow chip, has about 105 qubits. These are physical qubits, not logical qubits. That's another thing. You need a certain amount of actual physical qubits to reduce the errors and increase the stability of the puzzle formation of quantum computing. To actually have a functional quantum computing machine, it doesn't have to work that long. And so the Willow chip operated for about 100 microseconds with 105 qubits. There we go. That's 100, in case you haven't heard of the phrase before, microseconds, that's 0.1 millisecond. Okay, well, if you need 20 seconds, you would need somewhere around 400 of these chips to actually be functional. Quick math, 20 seconds divided by 0.1 millisecond is 200,000. So you need 200,000 times the compute efficiency of the Willow chip to break cryptography, if you could even pull it off in 20 seconds in the future. This is why Jensen says we're 15 to 30 years away. Now, on a more practical basis, people think we need about 400 times the qubits that Google put together in the Willow chip to even get close to having a hope of breaking these sort of cryptographies. So, Willow's quantum chip is really just a research step in the right direction, that they had a stable quantum computer for 0.1 milliseconds. Is that actually functional? No. But from a research point of view, it is fantastic. Okay, cool. So all of that is gate-based quantum computing. So what are existing quantum computing companies using, like D-Wave? D-Wave uses a quantum computing process known as annealing. The easiest way to think about this is, rather than starting with a messy puzzle and trying to put it together, imagine just sort of like pouring water down a mountain, and then whichever path the water goes the fastest is the way the energy goes for the quantum computer. And I'm way oversimplifying this, okay? And that's your optimized path. So what is that useful for? Well, it's really useful for really specific purposes, like planning delivery routes at UPS, scheduling workers, and protein folding, maybe even some finance. These are not general purpose quantum computers. They're very, very specific purpose computers. They're not a threat to cryptography. They're like the opposite of gate-based, right? Annealing is a totally different technology. So notice how quantum computing via the Willow chip got you something that was, 1/200,000th as good as what you really need to do what the magic of quantum computers can do. And it was a research milestone in gate-based computing. And the actual stocks that were just going up are annealed-based quantum computing optimization companies. This is why NVIDIA says we're 15 to 30 years away. Fun note though, NVIDIA is hiring quantum engineers. I did also, though, take a very brief peek at the D-Wave fundamentals. I don't want to say this is a deep dive at all because it's not. This is just super surface level. But yes, the stock did run up a lot after the Willow chip numbers. But take a look at or the Willow chip announcement, I should say, some of their financials. They lost $44.6 million in free cash flow in 24, $46 million in 2023. Their revenue in the 3 months ending in September, so Q3, was down 27% from last year. In fairness, their revenue year over year was up slightly from last year. If you look at the 9-month portion, they're up about 11% over here. Though I do think it's interesting that year over year, their sales and marketing expenses exploded. Their sales and marketing expenses are up 51%. And their R&D expenses in that quarter and on the year-over-year basis are actually down. So they're spending a lot more money marketing their product and less money researching their product and more money on G&A. And so that's why their loss actually ended up growing when you compare year to year for their loss on operations. If you look at their balance sheet, to me, it seems like they've got less than a year of actual cash flow left. And if you just look at their payables, they've got just enough money to really cover a year and a few months, but they're going to have to raise some money. It would be a perfect time to raise some money now, given that their stock has memed up. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, look, I'm not the best at giving you the greatest deep dive in quantum computing. So if somebody can give a refined explanation on this in the comments, I'm happy to heart it or pin it or whatever. But I wanted to give that as a breakdown because I think it's really important to know when you hear quantum computing, this is going to give you a lot more perspective. Okay, different types of quantum computing. Research milestones in one don't equal all of a sudden D-Wave is going to the moon. It could for momentum purposes because these stocks trade so minorly. They have such little float. But that's also why they can have in one day because all of a sudden the buy order book freezes up. Nobody wants to buy anymore and people want out and then it rapidly disassembles, right? All right. Enough about quantum. Let's now talk about the Federal Reserve. So the minutes came out today. In my opinion, these were mostly a nothing burger. There were few signs here of concern about persistent inflationary pressures in the market. Worth noting, I did read all of it, so I want you to know I actually went through the Fed minutes. They said that equity prices rose in anticipation of Trump and after. Liquidity in treasuries deteriorated somewhat. Markets anticipate rate cuts to slow considerably in 2025, and Fed communications helped the perception of these slower cuts. GDP growth is expected to be slightly slower with 2% inflation in 2017. Downside risks to the labor market have eased in recent months, and all of them judged the risks to inflation had increased. This is probably the most important part, and if you look at page 9, they basically say the following. Likely effects of political changes in trade and immigration policy, that's a quote, would lead to the upside in inflation risks. So this all started on December 18th when the Fed all of a sudden decided rather than reacting to inflationary impetuses like tariff policies, they're going to start trying to front-run inflation policies. This is why a lot of people are comparing the market right now to December of 2021, where they're like, in December of 2021, the Fed went harsh and told us they were going to raise rates. That was a disaster. This December 18th meeting might somewhat be similar, where they're kind of like, yeah, we're going to front-run Trump, which is also kind of interesting because they didn't front-run stimulus inflation. They're like, it'll be transitory, it won't matter. And then they were way behind the curve. Now people think they are way too aggressively ahead of the curve, that they're crushing the labor market, and they're crushing the market for Trump in anticipation of tariffs, which may never come. Because my thesis, of course, I want to just always clarify where my opinion is. My opinion is that with rates this high, it's just a matter of time before the economy stalls out. And when it does, the market crashes, Donald Trump's not going, unless we get really good jobs data, right? If we get really good jobs data, it'll be fine. Like if we get 3 months in a row here of great jobs data, hey, fine, great, soft landing achieved, right? Excellent. But Donald Trump's not going to institute his tariffs if the market's crashing, and so then the Fed is tightening for nothing and causing a potential crash for nothing. Freaking idiots. Like, you should know Trump's just negotiating, which we're going to talk about Greenland in just a moment, which will be really fun, but we got to get through the fires first. So do a lot of people. That was freaking terrible. But anyway, as far as the Fed and Nick Tiermos over at the Wall Street Journal, Nick T wrote an article basically saying the Fed is expected to keep rates steady for January, so don't anticipate a Federal Reserve cut in January. I could give you the market implied probabilities as well really quickly. Okay, those shifted a bit today. The market implied chance of a cut right now in January is basically negative 4.8%. So like the markets think there's like no chance that we're going to get a cut in January. And that rises a little bit, but not much, to like a third when we get to March. All right. So today we did also have Waller talk. from the Federal Reserve. He says that he thinks inflation is going to keep making further progress because 12-month measures of inflation could drop meaningfully in the next few months because of the Q1 pickup last year. All right, this is a lapping argument. It basically says that because inflation in Q1 last year was elevated, when we compare this year's inflation to last year, we should have lower numbers this year because, you know, like if your last year number is 305 and it was really high, and these aren't exact numbers, I'm just saying it, and this year's number has to beat that higher number. If it comes in even just slightly higher, it's almost going to look flat or maybe even negative compared to last year. Not exact numbers. I'm just making stuff up to try to help understand comparing to last year. But anyway, that was Waller today. So with all that out of the way and macro out of the way, let's now talk fire, politics, and then we got to talk Greenland and crypto a little bit. All right, ready for this? In case you haven't already heard, I'm sure you have, California is on fire once again. Donald Trump posted, no water in fire hydrants, no money in FEMA. This is what Joe Biden is leaving me. Thanks, Joe. This is true, especially regarding the fire hydrants. We need to talk about that. So far, we are experiencing the worst fire in Los Angeles history, with more than 1,000 structures hit in the Pacific Palisades, over 11,000 acres. We've had multiple different fires in Santa Paula, fires in the Olivos fire in the Ventura County area. We're good here. Just wanted to shout that out. There are a lot of people who are suffering, though, and my heart goes out to them and their families and their pets and their homes and their businesses. The Hearst fire, the Woodley fire, the Eaton fire, which is like over 10,600 acres. We're at 0% containment, which isn't unusual while the winds are still blowing. Usually, once the winds stop blowing, you can actually contain these fires. A lot of people misunderstand California fires because they assume that California fires are really just like any other fire. And this really isn't true. Now, yes, there's more California can do, and we're going to talk about that. But something that you really have to know when it comes to California fires is they're just mostly driven by topography and wind. And in California, we've got a lot of mountains on the coast, which create valleys for wind to blow through. And these valleys make fires so freaking deadly. Yesterday, we had fires that were spreading because of wind gusts between 50 to 100 miles an hour, in some cases up to 200 mile an hour gusts, which is absolutely insane. This is why planes were grounded in many different areas, but especially firefighting planes. But take a look at this. When you pull up this is the Windy app. I think it's great for aviation as well. You can see Wednesday at 8 a.m. this morning, I don't have yesterday's winds anymore, but you can see how right here you've got mountains and ridges that basically block the winds in this lower sort of area of Los Angeles. But where they funnel through is through the Burbank Valley, and they come out over here by the Palisades and Malibu. And in those areas, that's where we've got substantial fires. And winds, specifically what we call the east winds, are famous for causing fires in California. Now, a lot of people are freaking out, especially on social media, because there's talk about how insurance companies canceled policies before the Los Angeles wildfires. And this is true. Companies like State Farm and other companies did cancel insurance policies this summer. This is actually a very common time, and I'm not defending insurance companies at all. It's a very common time for insurance companies to cancel policies because it's before fire season, which is usually associated with those easterly winds. In case you're not in aviation or familiar with how winds work, when somebody tells you, hey, winds are at 90 degrees or easterly winds, that's the direction the winds are coming from. That took, just between us, okay? That took me a little while to understand. So I was like, oh, okay, yeah, winds at 90 degrees, so they're blowing that way? Like, that was my stupid, ignorant prior self. Now I know better. And so I thought I'd share that with you. All right, anyway. So it's very common that the east winds cause fires, and they're bad. They blow a lot. Like, nobody knows how to blow better. And these exacerbate the problems that you have in California. Now, we're going to talk about more of the problems that we have, don't worry. In 2019, Donald Trump talked about how there are old trees in California sitting and rotting and dying all over the place. This argument from Donald Trump in 2019 is not actually entirely untrue. It's kind of true. By some estimates, there are potentially as many as 163 million dead trees in California. A lot of this is due to the droughts that we face in California. As many as 1/3 of homes in California also lie close to dense vegetation or right up to it. So if you put it together, it's about 33% are within 1.5 miles, and some are just like sitting right on top of really dense vegetation. And a lot of this vegetation, what happens in droughts is basically the brush dies, kind of think like a desert, and then you're left with tumbleweeds, or you're left with mulch, basically, that just gets baked and dried out in the California dry air. This isn't like Florida. These aren't like Florida forest fires, which we rarely get. It's like swamp fires, right? Because everything's wet. You have really high humidity. You have really low humidity. So when you combine droughts, dead ammunition for fires, basically, easterly winds, and low humidity, you basically create a tinderbox in California for fires. Now, Donald Trump says people need to manage the forests. Nobody is managing the forests. And yes, this is true. Even Berkeley, which leans left, obviously, I got into Berkeley, but I didn't go to Berkeley. I went to UCLA for what it's worth. They argue that forest management actually helps. And that's a big thing coming from Berkeley, in my opinion. But they argue that, yes, we need to conduct controlled burns. We need to burn the mulch that's on the ground in a manner that we can control it when we're not in an emergency situation. And yeah, we need to manage our forests because controlled burns and maybe even debrushing actually helps prevent large catastrophic fires. This has been studied many times before. When I ran for governor in California, I ran on doing more controlled burns. Controlled burns are really important because when you have really windy environments, what you're actually doing is you're worsening pollution through what's known as black carbon, or the spread of black carbon. Black carbon is basically soot, and it's really bad for the environment. Now, it doesn't last that long in the air because it usually, it happens in concentrated times when there's a lot of wind. This is why you do controlled burns when there's not a lot of wind. See, when you control the burns, you can decide when to burn it. Anyway, black soot doesn't last that long in the environment because, the wind dies down. But black carbon is considered 100 times more potent than greenhouse gases to climate change. So it's kind of ironic that there's so much of a push for, climate change, but then you're not doing controlled burns when black carbon is so much more damaging to the environment. And these uncontrolled burns are so much more damaging. Okay, then people get all prehistoric and they're like, yeah, well, California was on fire all the time in prehistory. Sure, but we also didn't have homes and people living there and the destruction to our economy. Sometimes people have this fallacious argument. They're like, oh, if a hurricane comes by and destroys 100 windows, well, that's good for the economy because now people have to replace 100 windows. Wrong. You basically dug a hole to fill it. Yes, you spent the money to replace 100 windows, but what did you get out of that? You got the same thing you had before. You got back to status quo. Now, if you spend that money on, let's say, research on quantum computers, and maybe you actually spend that money in the same way where it has a multiplier in the economy, but you spend that money in a way where you're actually creating a potential good for, let's say, curing cancer, well, that's so much more beneficial. Right, and obviously I'm being extreme with the example just to show that, no, disasters are not good for the economy. They bring you back to net neutral. It's actually bad for the economy because now you have less capital to deploy on things that actually matter for the advancement of society. So no, it's really bad, and forest management is actually very, very important, and it's a premise that I ran on when I ran for governor in California. In fact, here's just a little piece here. Who is Kevin Paffrath? Cal Matters. Paffrath's 5-year plan includes eliminating income taxes for households earning less than $250,000, legalizing gambling, because we're going to tax the crap out of it, reforming the state's water and wildfire management systems, and creating net negative energy planned communities around the state. Basically building more homes so, things would be affordable in California. I don't understand. Newsom said he was going to do better, and he didn't. I'm really disappointed. He said that he was going to do better when he got reelected, and he also said he was going to do better when Joe Biden got elected. Listen to it yourself.
We are committed as a team, as a partnership with the legislature and other state agencies, including now the federal government no longer a sparring partner, but a working partner. Federal government where we're not addressing headwinds, but tailwinds in terms of the support. A memorandum of understanding doubling our respective commitments to vegetation management and forest management and prescribed burns to support the Biden administration with resources, not just rhetoric, to help this collective cause.
Resources, not just rhetoric. What did we get? Oopsies. I'm sorry, okay? I can't hide. I ran against the guy for governor, okay? Obviously, I lost. I'm a loser. But I can't stand that guy. Okay, I'm sorry. And I'm generally, like, you know me, I'm generally extremely neutral on this channel. At least the best you can be. But that one just pisses me off. So anyway, then we get into this idea that Trump says that California chooses to dump extra water into the ocean. All right. So let's pull up the map. Yes. A lot of water does flow from California rivers into the ocean. This is not untrue. Okay? Yes. Yes, water flows into the ocean. One of the ways we look at that is you look at the San Joaquin and Sacramento Delta. And when you look at that, you'll actually be close to where House Hack has been a bunch. But look at this. This right here is the Delta. Okay, I've flown over this area many, many a time. And basically, you get the San Joaquin River and the Sacramento River. They just naturally dump into this delta. So this is a natural flow of water. The water comes off mountains that you have over here. It fills up rivers, hopefully enough, as the snow melts, and then it slowly just dumps out into the ocean. Yes, it is true. Water dumps into the ocean. That naturally happens. Now, Donald Trump says California is doing that on purpose. No, California is not purposefully dumping the water into the ocean. But the reverse is true. California is purposefully trying to not dump the water in the ocean. Okay, let me phrase that a little differently. California could be damming some of this water, diverting the water to actually help fill up more of our reservoirs in California to minimize the drought that we have. Or droughts that we tend to have, or the water problems that we tend to have. Remember, I ran on water management for governor as well. Okay, but Gavin Newsom actually promotes dam removal. Here he is cheering the largest dam removal project in history. Listen to this.
Largest dam removal project in U.S. history and one of the most significant, if not the most significant, water restoration project, bringing back salmon and steelhead into this basin. This project could not have happened with...
Okay, basically, hey, we want to protect the fish and we want salmon or smelt or whatever, and we're worried about the species, so we're not going to dam water. And we're not going to build up or pump up reservoirs or the Colorado River with more water because we want to protect the environment. But by protecting the environment, you're actually enabling these crazy catastrophic fires, which are even worse for the freaking environment. See, Berkeley has found that they could just release new fish in the areas where the fish are dying if you divert water. They're like, instead of, have you heard of the phrase catch and release? Okay, that has to do with immigration or fishing, depending on what you're talking about. There's also something called hatch and release. Yes, hatch. So you grow eggs. Well, like you take other fish and you make them have babies basically. And then you take the eggs, you grow them in tanks, and then you go throw the fish in the water. Like, that is another way to solve fish populations, especially smelt. So yes, you can solve the Delta smelt endangered population by just throwing more of them into the freaking water. In other words, yes, you can divert water and dam water and fill frickin' things up. Look, when I ran for governor, I talked about doubling the flow of water to California's Colorado River so we could actually distribute it to our farms throughout the entire state, specifically the breadbasket of California, which we need. We grow a lot of food. You've got dry farms. It's crazy. But what you also have is fire hydrants running out of water. Okay, so why do fire hydrants run out of water? Is this malicious? Is this intentional? Well, it depends how far down the rabbit hole you want to go, and I had a conversation with somebody about this on X. You could follow me there at RealMeatKevin. how do you not have water for fire hydrants? That's not ignorant, that's malicious. I wrote, there are reasons for this. If the power goes out, the pumps fail. Okay, this is important to know. Power went out for like 400,000 people yesterday in Los Angeles. We had power surges up here in Ventura. If the tanks run dry, because certain areas like the Pacific Palisades are like the water reservoirs they have, they're tanks. And if they run out because everybody's turning on their water and trying to hose down their property, or a house burns down and the water line is just leaking and spewing everywhere, then guess what? Hydrants have no water. The same thing happened in the Thomas Fire in 2017 in Ventura County. So we could have seen this crap coming. We could have seen it coming from, how many years ago was that? 7, 8 years ago? Come on, 7.5 years ago? We could have seen this coming. That yes, fire hydrants can stop freaking working, especially in hilly areas, because you need pumps to pump the water up the hill. And what happens when the fire hydrants don't work? You could have firefighters, but they can't do jack anything. So yes, there are explanations for this, but that doesn't give you a good reason, because like Patrick says, hey, I'm a Floridian who sells industrial pumps for a living. Like, come on, we can solve this with generators. And he's right. And so this, I say, I 100% agree. In my opinion, bad politics and bad budgeting. No excuse. I suppose we could say political corruption is the direct malicious cause. Look, I had a whole plan for solving homelessness in California. Of course, Gavin Newsom won because he said his plan is better. Homelessness is worse than ever before in California. And some people actually say homeless people, and there are videos of this, just start fires for fun. Because what else are they doing? And in windy times, what do you get? Massive catastrophic fires. So like, see how all these problems really start relating? It's kind of bad. But anyway, Newsom bragged about dam removal in the past. We talked about that. But another thing that's creating a lot of, so regarding the fire hydrants, yes, this is a big problem and it should be fixed. It's like insane that a state with up to 13% income taxes doesn't have water for its fire hydrants. That's insane. I'm going to say the word. I'm sorry, and I'm not meaning to offend anybody. It is full on retarded that we don't have water in our damn fire hydrants because of politics. That's corrupt. No wonder insurance companies are fleeing the state because they can't trust the government to actually do anything. Mind you, the government did nothing, still does nothing, when illegal marijuana farms hook up to fire hydrants and steal the water straight from the fire hydrants, depleting the very reserves we need for these fires. What did California do the last time? They just removed the fire hydrants. Yeah, when they found out marijuana farms were stealing water from our fire hydrants, rather than actually punishing somebody, they just removed the damn fire hydrant. You could Google this. This is real stuff. This is documented, and it happens. It's insane. That's California politics for you today. Here's some more California politics. USAID helped provide funding for 16 fire brigades to Ukraine. That's a 2024 story, which means California sent extra fire trucks to Ukraine. Yeah. And not just California, but the federal government as well, because literally the city of LA, from a 2022 article here, the city of LA sent excess supplies that they had, including helmets, body armor, hoses, nozzles, turnouts, blah, 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 to Ukraine. So fire trucks and fire defense equipment in storage for emergencies when, God forbid, you have to call in all off-duty fire fighters to actually come in and help, that you actually have material for them to use. It was just given away. Now, but that would be amazing, right? Like, would California ever actually have to call in all of their off-duty firefighters? Breaking. Emergency officials have just announced that all off-duty Los Angeles County firefighters must report immediate. Oh. All right. I can understand why people are frustrated. Stuff like that pisses people off. It's one thing if we give away our fire equipment and we can actually handle the fires that we have. It's another thing when we're giving away our stuff and then we burn to the freaking ground. Now, of course, social media is all up in arms about this. Why? Because Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yes, apparently DEI has been the big priority for the Los Angeles Fire Department, rather than actually focusing on the best potential firefighting. The Los Angeles Fire Department has it has its first female and first LGBTQ fire chief in LA history. She promised a more inclusive department and supported Mayor Garcetti's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Bureau at the LA Fire Department. This bureau specifically had to do with hiring, workplace conduct, and promotion, which basically means that if you're Black or Hispanic, or a minority or LGBTQ or whatever, you have a highlighter through your name because they have a diversity, equity, and inclusion bureau that's going to make sure that you get priority. Now, a lot of people think that that would never happen. That would never actually, affect somebody, right? There's no way that they're going to pass up a potentially good and capable firefighter, right? Well, listen to this for a minute because it's worth it.
My white privilege so badly. I graduated North Hollywood High with a 1.7 GPA.
North Hollywood.
I could not find a job. I walked to a fire station in North Hollywood. I was 19. I was living in the garage of my family home. My mom was on welfare and food stamps, and I said, "Can I get a job as a fireman?" And they said, "No, because you're not Black, Hispanic, or a woman. We'll see in about 7 years." And I went to a construction site and dug ditches and picked up garbage for the next 7 years. I got a letter in the mail sent to my father's house saying, "Your time has come to do the written exam for the LA Fire Department." I took it, and I was standing in line, and I had a young woman of color standing behind me in line, and I said, just out of curiosity, when did you sign up to become a fireman? Because I did it, or a person, 7 years ago, and she said, Wednesday. That is an example of my white privilege. It's
Oopsies. This is bad, okay? It's bad. Politics does matter. Anyway, Joe Biden did arrive via Marine One, I believe, to Santa Monica Airport. He spoke at the press conference on the California fires. The press conference was pretty lame. It was basically the brass showing in a PR move a PowerPoint-style presentation to the president and Newsom. I don't think Biden was actually really paying attention because he just sort of kept looking down at a note card that he had. And after making a few mumbling statements from his note card, he started talking about the birth of a great-grandchild in his family, which a lot of people looked at and are like, are you kidding me? Gavin Newsom was also there. I think the biggest frustration, though, that people have is that the mayor, Karen Bass, was not in the state yesterday. She's back today. That's because she was on a trip to Africa celebrating the inauguration of the president of Ghana. Yes, the president of Ghana was hanging out with our mayor in Los Angeles in Africa when the fires broke out, even though we knew the easterly winds were coming. Lauren has literally been talking to me for a week. She's like, Kevin, the winds are coming. You better not be flying on these days. Everyone in California knew the winds were coming, and we know what happens when the winds are coming. And the mayor is like, nah, man, I gotta go hang out with the president of Ghana. Karen Bass has also been accused of cutting the fire department's budget by $22.9 million. But if you actually compare that to the actual expenses that the government has spent, or the fire department has actually spent, the fire department spent about $903 million last year. And now they're only being allocated $837 million, which is a cut of about $66 million from what they actually spent last year. And given that this is the worst fire in LA's history, it's possible we might need a little bit more money for LA Fire, but they just don't have the resources because they're focused on their own political pet projects. It's disgusting. Okay, wildfires are often caused by power lines, homeless, accidental, cars, other purposes, But again, they can be contained if we actually and properly manage our forest fire prevention. We've already talked about the Berkeley information, so we won't go into that in heavy detail. But it's worth looking at a few clips and images of what's going on, what the fire looked like, in case you haven't seen these yet. So I'm just going to go through a few of these. After this, we're going to talk about Greenland and Donald Trump. There's a lot to talk about with Greenland and Donald Trump. So we're going to touch on that. This is obviously what a windy fire can look like. There were also videos circulating social media of people being in homes while they were catching fire. Here are just some shots of afterwards in the Palisades. I was actually in the Palisades just a few days ago on a very important meeting on Sunday. And it's interesting because if you follow me on Instagram at MeetKevin, I actually posted a video about how beautiful I thought the Palisades were and how it was basically like a town of the Jeffersons. Now, the Palisades Mall supposedly did survive, so that's good. Not everything is destroyed, but across from the Palisades Mall, you did see the destruction of the 100-year-old building the Starbucks was in, which is also quite devastating. I mean, you could see how terrible this all looks. You'll also see the, here you could briefly see the Palisades Library on fire. Malibu, which remember from the Windy app, Malibu here, you'll see a home collapse that's on fire. These are, $10 to $20 million homes that are right on the beach. This is sort of what the fire looked like from an aerial point of view. LA flights were still ongoing, although they were reporting moderate turbulence for Boeing 747, which if Boeings are reporting turbulence, you don't want to be out in a little plane. But let's just say it's pretty bad. The destruction is absolutely terrible. There you could see a nice image. This was actually shared by Elon, where you could see the homes on the beach and what it looks like or looked like last night. This was from this morning, by the way, this one that's showing right now. So it gives you a little bit of a look of what the disaster looks like that's going on. It's really bad. It's really sad. And I just always encourage, if there's ever a fire or a windy situation, I always recommend people start thinking about preparing. Even if you don't think the fire is going to come to your area, if you have electric vehicles, the most important thing I could recommend to you is please, please, please charge your car. That's an important one, because if you gotta go, you gotta go. Because if this is what it looks like outside of your window, let's just say it's time to go out the other side of your home because you're about to get cooked like an oven. I also don't understand why these people are just standing here filming this. I understand the winds are sort of blowing the fire up the hill, and you'll actually see them subside in just a moment. But it's just a matter of time, because the moment one of those glass windows breaks, those flames come inside and cook you alive. You inhale one breath of those flames, you die. Like, it doesn't matter if your home's on fire. It's the breath. It's the hot inhale of those hot gases that kills you almost instantaneously. Very bad. Very sad. So please, GTFO if there's fire around. It's so dumb to be standing here, but, he's got to do it for the gram. Now we got to talk about Greenland. This is pretty remarkable because we briefly touched on this yesterday. Donald Trump talked about needing Greenland for national security purposes. All right. To understand Greenland, you kind of, this is, all right, there's a lot to this, but let me start by saying this. The Economist hates Donald Trump, and The Economist thinks Donald Trump should actually buy Greenland. So, this is kind of a way of them saying, maybe he's onto something, which is really rare. And I always love knowing what people's political biases are, because that way you could do that. It's like, oh, they hate Trump, and even they think it's a good idea. Anyway, okay, so look, here's China, okay? This is China. This is the Earth. Wow. Russia's like, over here. So they kind of touch each other. And there's a purpose to this. When China and Russia touch each other like they do right over here, you don't really need to go through the ocean to trade between Russia and China. We know they could just I shouldn't say ship, but they could just, Isn't it weird that like cargo goes on ships, but then we ship things, like a shipment comes on freight trucks? It feels backwards. But anyway, so China, they're connected by land, so we're not so worried about their ability to trade with each other. They can trade through land over here. But what does Russia want to do? Well, what Russia and China, they want to trade with Europe and the United States. Not so much Russia with the United States, but China does, right? So this polar route requires a lot of ice-breaking equipment to get through. But look what's right here, Greenland. Greenland can literally intercept whatever Arctic trade is going on here or the polar trades that are going on over here. And Russia and China have been using a lot of ice-breaking ships to go through here. Russia has been sending a lot of submarines in this area. They want this area. So this is of strategic and geopolitical importance, that is, Greenland is, right? Okay, fine. So why does Trump want it? Well, Russia builds military bases in the Arctic. Russia is posturing. Russia has been increasing their submarine patrols. Beijing has been investing in mining projects in Greenland. The Pentagon actually blocked 3 airports that China wanted to build there. Major trade routes that go along what's called the Polar Silk Road actually avoid the Suez Canal and have a much shorter route. The Suez Canal route to go basically from China to Europe, which you can see on screen here, this could take 25 to 45 days, whereas this route over here takes 20 to 25 days, obviously depending on where you start. It's worth remembering, though, that this polar route is usually only functional during the winter, so you're not going to use it all year long. It is a much shorter distance. It's about 13 to 15,000 kilometers versus the 20,000 kilometers by going all the way around. And you don't have to deal with the whole Middle East crisis that's going on. Greenland also has potentially 17.5 billion barrels of undiscovered oil, 148 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, and a lot of rare earth metals. In fact, The Economist says that 3% of the world's oil reserves are there. 43 of 50 critical minerals are available to, which are of strategic importance to the United States, are available in Greenland. And The Economist says paying, say, $50 billion, some multiple of their small GDP for Greenland, would be the, quote, deal of the century. Now, the more I read about Greenland, the less far-fetched it sounds. Because initially, when I heard about Trump wanting Greenland, I'm like, this sounds like I'm playing Age of Empires, and there's no gold left on any of the islands that we have occupied, and we're all going for the gold left on an island somewhere else. Talk of acquiring Greenland started in 1867 and occurred again in World War II, but really never truly has taken place again until today. President of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, also wants to rename North America Mexican America after Donald Trump threatened to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Do Kwon, the founder of Terraform Labs, will go on trial in January of 2026. Some crypto bulls believe that Trump's crypto regulations and Fed money printing will be the next big thing for crypto in 2025. This comes as Kazakhstan has shut down 36 illegal crypto exchanges and the country is building out a CBDC. And the 1-hour RSI, relative strength index for Bitcoin, is the lowest since it hit 60,000. So, what's left? Well, we'll all find out on Jobs Day, won't we? Anyway, thank you so much for watching this. I hope you like the little chapter markers we have at the bottom. If you want the daily wealth email, make sure to join it over at meetkevin.com. I'm not going to go through it today because there's way too much that we've covered in this, so we'll cover it in a different one, or just get the email over at meetkevin.com. You can also sign up for the Alpha Report at the bottom of the website, meetkevin.com. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, and good luck.
Why not advertise these things that you told us here? I feel like nobody else knows about this.
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Congratulations, man. You have done so much. People love you. People look up to you.
Kevin Paffrath there, financial analyst and YouTuber. Meet Kevin. Always great to get your take.